The crystal chandeliers of the Westridge Corporation's penthouse ballroom sparkled with 1,000 tiny lights, each one reflecting off champagne glasses and designer dresses. Christmas music drifted through the air, soft, elegant, expensive. The kind of party where even the napkins cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Margaret Williams pushed her cleaning cart along the marble hallway just outside the ballroom, moving quietly, invisibly. At 62 years old, she had perfected the art of being unseen. Her dark hands, worn rough from decades of scrubbing floors and polishing wood, gripped the cart handle as she paused near the service entrance. Through the frosted glass doors, she could see shadows of people laughing, dancing, celebrating. She wasn't supposed to be here this late. Her shift had ended at 6. But someone had spilled red wine in the executive corridor, and Margaret never said no to extra work. Not with her grandson's medical bills piling up. Not with Christmas 3 days away. Are you serious right now? The voice cut through the hallway like broken glass. Margaret turned to see a tall man in a midnight blue Tom Ford suit striding toward her. Richard Westridge III. Everyone knew who he was. Billionaire. Owner of Westridge Corporation. His face was plastered on the cover of Forbes last month. 45 years old, silver at his temples, the kind of confident smile that came from never hearing the word no. "Sir, I'm just finishing," Margaret began. "Finishing." Richard's voice rose, echoing off the marble. "The Christmas gala is happening right now. Right there." He jabbed a finger toward the ballroom. "And you're out here with your cart? With your uniform?" Margaret's heart sank. "I was told to clean the wine stain in. I don't care what you were told." Richard stepped closer, his cologne overwhelming. Behind him, several party guests had stopped near the glass doors, watching. "Do you have any idea what kind of image this creates? Do you understand that I have investors in there? Board members?" "I'm sorry, sir. I'll move to the service. You'll move off this floor entirely." His eyes were cold, flat. "Actually, you know what? You're done. Tonight. I want you out of this building." Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. "Sir, please. I've worked here for 18 years. I just need to..." 18 years of what? Pushing a mop. Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. Several guests were now openly staring through the glass. A woman in a red dress whispered something to her companion. "Let me explain something to you. This party? This is for people who matter. People who've built something. People who contribute." He gestured at her uniform, her cart, her entire existence with one dismissive wave. "You don't belong here. You never did. And frankly, seeing you out here, dressed like that, on Christmas..." He shook his head slowly. "It's depressing. It brings down the whole atmosphere." Margaret's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. Behind Richard, more faces appeared at the glass. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked curious. No one moved to help. "Security!" Richard snapped his fingers, and 2 men in black suits appeared almost instantly. "Escort her out. And make sure her badge is deactivated. Tonight." "Sir," one security guard said quietly, his eyes apologetic. "It's Christmas Eve in 3 days. Maybe we could..." "Did I ask for your opinion?" Richard's voice went arctic. "Get her out. Now." The guards moved toward Margaret. She stepped back instinctively, her cart rolling slightly. "My things," she whispered. "I have my coat in the break room. My purse." "You can pick them up tomorrow from the front desk," Richard said, already turning away. "If they're still there." As the security guards gently took her arms, Margaret looked past them, through the glass doors, into the golden warmth of the Christmas party. She saw tables loaded with food. She saw people laughing, drinks in hand, not a care in the world. And she saw Richard Westridge III walk back into that room, straighten his tie, and accept a champagne flute from a waiter. He didn't look back once. The last thing Margaret heard as the guards led her to the service elevator was the muffled sound of Silent Night playing inside the ballroom. The December wind bit through Margaret's thin cardigan as she stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue, watching the taillights of taxis blur past. She'd left her winter coat in the break room. Her purse too. Inside that purse was her phone, her wallet, the Christmas card her grandson had made her last week. To Grandma, the best in the world, it said in crayon. 7-year-old handwriting. She pulled the cardigan tighter and started walking. The subway station was 12 blocks away. Might as well have been 12 miles. Margaret had taken this same walk every working day for 18 years. Past the coffee shop where she never bought coffee, too expensive. Past the boutique windows displaying dresses that cost more than her monthly rent. Past the businessman who never held the door, and the doorman who always did. 18 years. She remembered her first day at Westridge Corp like it was yesterday. She'd been 44 years old then, newly widowed, with a daughter in college and no life insurance because James had always said they'd get to it next year. Next year never came. The heart attack took him on a Tuesday morning while he was fixing Mrs. Patterson's fence for free, because that's the kind of man he was. Margaret had applied to 17 cleaning jobs before Westridge called her back. She'd shown up 30 minutes early, pressed slacks, ironed shirt, reference letters in a folder. The hiring manager, a tired woman named Susan, had looked at her references and nodded once. You start Monday. Night shift. Minimum wage, but there's overtime if you want it. Margaret had wanted it. She'd wanted every hour they'd give her. She worked nights so she could take care of her daughter's baby during the day when her daughter was at her nursing job. Little Marcus. Born premature, spent 2 months in the NICU, came home with tubes and monitors and a medical bill that could have bought a house. But Margaret never complained. Not once. She learned every hallway of the Westridge building. Every office, every conference room, every bathroom. She learned which executives left tips at Christmas and which ones never made eye contact. She learned how to remove coffee stains from white carpet, how to polish marble without leaving streaks, how to empty a trash can without making a sound. She learned how to be invisible. Grandma, why do you work at night? Marcus had asked her once. He was 5 then, gap-toothed, curious about everything. So I can be with you during the day, baby. But don't you get tired? Margaret had pulled him close, kissed his forehead. Never too tired for you. That was 3 years ago. Before the leukemia diagnosis. Before the experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Before Margaret started picking up double shifts, triple shifts, any shift they'd give her. The Westridge building disappeared behind her as she walked. Her feet ached. They always ached. Plantar fasciitis, the free clinic doctor had said. Gave her a pamphlet about stretches and better shoes. Margaret had nodded, thanked her, and kept wearing the same Walmart sneakers she'd been wearing for 2 years because new shoes meant less money for Marcus's medicine. She passed a church, the Catherine's, its nativity scene lit up in the front yard. Mary, Joseph, baby Jesus in the manger. The 3 wise men approaching with their gifts. Gold, frankincense, myrrh. Margaret stopped walking. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the baby in the manger. Thought about Marcus in his hospital bed. Thought about the bills on her kitchen table. Thought about Richard Westridge's face when he'd said, "You don't belong here. You never did." Something inside her chest cracked, just a little. She sat down on the church steps, even though the stone was freezing cold. Put her face in her hands. And for the first time in 18 years, through her husband's death, through her daughter's struggles, through Marcus's diagnosis, Margaret Williams let herself cry. Not big, dramatic sobs. Just quiet tears that ran down her cheeks and dripped onto the concrete. A woman walking her dog paused, looked at Margaret, then kept walking. A teenager in headphones passed without seeing her at all. Cars drove by, their headlights sweeping across her face. No one stopped. "Ma'am? You okay?" Margaret looked up. A young priest stood in the church doorway, backlit by warm yellow light from inside. He couldn't have been more than 30, with kind eyes and a concerned expression. She wiped her face quickly. "I'm fine. Sorry. I'll move." "You don't have to move." He came down the steps, sat beside her despite his clean black clothes and the dirty concrete. "Cold night to be sitting outside." "I was just resting." The priest nodded, didn't push. They sat in silence for a moment. From inside the church, Margaret could hear choir practice. "Oh Holy Night." Her favorite carol. "I'm Father Mike," he said finally. This is my first Christmas at St. Catherine's. Margaret. Nice to meet you, Margaret. He paused. We have coffee inside. It's not great coffee, but it's hot. Margaret shook her head. I should get home. My grandson, her voice caught. He's probably worried. The boy with leukemia? She turned to him, surprised. Father Mike smiled gently. You've been lighting candles here every Sunday for months. Always the same prayer. I remember faces. Margaret had forgotten about that. Every Sunday after her shift, before taking the subway home, she'd slip into St. Catherine's. Light a candle for Marcus. Kneel in the back pew where no one would see her. Pray to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. How is he? Father Mike asked. Fighting. Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. He's so brave. Braver than me. I doubt that. She looked at him. Anyone who works night shifts for 18 years to take care of their family? Father Mike said. Anyone who keeps showing up, keeps praying, keeps fighting when the world tells them to give up? That's not cowardice, Margaret. That's faith. The tears came again, hot and fast. Margaret tried to stop them, but couldn't. Father Mike didn't tell her it was okay. Didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat beside her while she cried, this woman he barely knew, on the steps of a church on a freezing December night. When she finally caught her breath, he stood and offered his hand. Come inside. Just for a few minutes. Warm up before you go home. Margaret hesitated, then took his hand. The inside of St. Catherine's was nothing like the Westridge Ballroom. No crystal chandeliers. No champagne. Just wooden pews worn smooth by 100 years of faithful hands, and candles flickering in red glass holders. The choir was practicing in the loft, mostly older women, their voices blending together in imperfect harmony. Father Mike brought her coffee in a styrofoam cup. It was terrible coffee, watery and weak, but it was warm. I lost my job tonight, Margaret said suddenly. She hadn't meant to say it out loud. Father Mike sat across from her. I'm sorry. 18 years. Gone. Because I was visible. Because I reminded someone that poor people exist. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. On Christmas. The irony. What will you do? I don't know. Margaret stared into her coffee. Find another job, I guess. Marcus's next treatment is in 2 weeks. The hospital won't wait. Do you have savings? She shook her head. Every penny goes to his medicine. What insurance doesn't cover, which is most of it. She looked up at the cross hanging above the altar. I've done everything right, Father. I've worked hard. I've been honest. I've never stolen, never cheated, never hurt anyone. And for what? For Marcus, Father Mike said quietly. So he has a chance. Margaret's eyes filled again. What if it's not enough? What if I can't save him? Then you'll know you tried. You'll know you loved him enough to break yourself into pieces trying. He leaned forward. That matters, Margaret. Maybe it doesn't pay the bills. Maybe it doesn't change the world. But it matters. From the choir loft, the women sang, Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices. Margaret closed her eyes and listened. Thought about Marcus's smile when she brought him his favorite books from the library. Thought about the way he held her hand during chemotherapy, trying to be brave. Thought about the crayon Christmas card in her purse that was still locked in the Westridge building. I should go, she said, standing. Thank you for the coffee. And for listening. Father Mike walked her to the door. Margaret? You're welcome here. Anytime. For coffee, for prayer, for silence. Whatever you need. She nodded, not trusting her voice. As she stepped back out into the cold, Father Mike called after her, Hey, that man who fired you tonight? He doesn't get to decide your worth. Remember that. Margaret turned back. Then who does? Father Mike smiled. You already know the answer. You've been fighting for him every day for 7 years. Margaret walked toward the subway with those words warming her chest more than the terrible coffee ever could. She didn't know that in 3 days, everything would change. She didn't know that the man who humiliated her would soon learn exactly who she was. She didn't know that sometimes, the universe keeps score. All she knew was that tomorrow morning, She'd wake up at 6 a.m., kiss Marcus on the forehead, and start looking for a new job. Because that's what she did. She kept going. Margaret didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd fed Marcus breakfast every morning for 7 years, staring at the stack of envelopes she'd been avoiding. Hospital bills. Credit card statements with interest rates that should be illegal. A notice from her landlord about next month's rent. And now, no job. At 6:47 a.m., her daughter Sarah came through the door, still in her nurse's scrubs from the night shift. Her eyes went immediately to Margaret's face. "Mama? What happened?" Margaret told her everything. The Christmas party. Richard Westridge. The security guards. Every humiliating detail. Sarah's face went through several emotions, shock, anger, pain, before settling on something Margaret recognized: resignation. The look of someone who'd been disappointed so many times they'd stopped being surprised. "We'll figure it out," Sarah said finally, but her voice was hollow. "We always do." But they both knew the math. Margaret's job had been barely enough. Without it, they were drowning. "I need to see Marcus before he wakes up," Margaret said, standing. "I promised I'd make him Christmas cookies today." Sarah grabbed her mother's arm. "Mama, they called from the hospital last night. They want to discuss options." The word hung in the air like a noose. "Options?" Margaret's voice cracked. "They're saying the experimental treatment isn't covered anymore. Insurance denied the claim. They're talking about comfort care." Comfort care. The phrase doctors used when they'd given up. When fighting became letting go. "No." Margaret's voice was steel. "No. We're not doing that. We're not giving up on him. Mama, the treatment costs $47,000 per cycle. We don't have." "I'll find it." Margaret grabbed her coat, the thin one, because her good coat was still locked in the Westridge building. "I'll find the money. I'll get another job. 2 jobs. 3 jobs. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "There's no time. The next treatment is in 12 days. 12 days to find $47,000. It might as well have been 12 days to fly to the moon. That afternoon, Margaret took the subway back to Westridge Corporation. Not to beg for her job back, she had too much pride for that, but to retrieve her belongings. Her coat. Her purse. The Christmas card from Marcus. The front desk security guard was different from the night before. A young woman named Tracy with kind eyes. "I'm here to pick up my things," Margaret said. "I was told they'd be at the front desk." Tracy checked her computer, frowned. "What's your name?" "Margaret Williams. I worked here for 18 years. "Yeah, I see your file." Tracy's frown deepened. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but there's a note here that says you're not allowed on the premises. I just need my coat. And my purse. They're in the break room on the—" "I understand, but Mr. Westridge personally flagged your ID last night. If you enter the building, I have to call the police." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. "Call the police? For retrieving my own belongings?" Tracy looked genuinely sorry. "I'm just doing my job. But look, give me your locker number. I'll go get your stuff on my lunch break and bring it down." "Okay." It wasn't okay. None of this was okay. But Margaret nodded because what choice did she have? "Locker 247, she said quietly. "Blue backpack, winter coat. Gray purse inside. I'll bring them down in an hour. I'm sorry about this." Margaret sat in the lobby cafe across the street, nursing a water she couldn't afford to pay for, waiting. Through the massive glass windows, she could see the Westridge building. 53 floors of steel and glass and money. She'd cleaned every single one of those floors at least 100 times. And now she couldn't even walk inside. 40 minutes later, Tracy came out, carrying Margaret's things. But her face was wrong. Upset. What happened? Margaret stood. Tracy handed her the backpack and coat. "Your purse, it wasn't there." "What do you mean it wasn't there?" "Your locker was empty except for these. I checked 3 times. Asked around. Nobody knows what happened to it." Margaret's world tilted. "My purse has everything. My phone. My wallet. My grandson's Christmas card. My apartment keys. My—" She stopped, breathless. My insulin pen. She was diabetic. Had been for 6 years. The insulin pen in her purse was supposed to last her through the week. Tracy's eyes widened. Oh no. Ma'am, I'll ask my supervisor, don't bother. Margaret's voice came out flat, dead. I know exactly what happened. She thought about Richard Westridge's last words, if they're still there. He'd known. He'd known someone would throw her things away. Or maybe he'd done it himself. A final humiliation. A final reminder that she was nothing. Margaret took her coat and backpack and walked out into the December cold. No phone. No money. No keys to her apartment. No insulin. And 12 days to save her grandson's life. Margaret walked 16 blocks to Sarah's apartment. She didn't have subway fare without her wallet, and by the time she arrived, her hands were shaking. Not from the cold. From low blood sugar. Sarah took one look at her mother and knew. Where's your insulin? Gone. With my purse. Mama, you need to eat. Now. Sarah rushed to the kitchen, came back with orange juice and crackers. When's the last time you checked your levels? This morning. I was at 140. That was 8 hours ago. Sarah's voice had that nurse edge to it, the one that meant she was scared but trying not to show it. You need to get a refill. Today. They both knew what that meant. Without insurance, which Margaret had just lost along with her job, a single insulin pen cost $350. Money they absolutely did not have. But they went anyway. To the pharmacy on 8th Street where Margaret had been a customer for 6 years. The pharmacist, Tom, was a middle-aged man with reading glasses that never sat straight on his nose. He knew Margaret by name. Hey Margaret, he said when she approached the counter. Then he saw her face. What's wrong? I need an emergency insulin refill. My prescription is on file. I don't have my insurance card right now. Tom typed into his computer. Frowned. Your insurance is showing as inactive. I know. I lost my job yesterday. But I can pay cash. The lie tasted bitter. How much? For the Novolog pen? $350. Margaret felt Sarah stiffen beside her. Is there a generic? Something cheaper? Tom's face showed genuine sympathy. Margaret, the generic is $280. And that's the best I can do. He leaned forward, lowered his voice. Look, I can give you 3 days' worth of samples. That's all I'm allowed to do without a prescription refill. But after that, 3 days is fine. Thank you, Tom. He bagged the samples, handed them over. Come back before Christmas. We'll figure something out. Outside the pharmacy, Sarah exploded. Figure something out? What does that mean? We need money, not sympathy. Sarah, no, Mama. This is insane. You worked for that company for 18 years. 18 years. And they throw you away like garbage? Take your medication? Won't even let you in the building? People on the sidewalk were starting to stare. Sarah, please. Lower your voice. But why should I lower my voice? You've been quiet your whole life. You've taken every insult, every humiliation, every slap in the face, and you just smile and say, yes, sir, and keep scrubbing their floors. Sarah's eyes were blazing. When are you going to fight back? Margaret looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant woman who'd worked herself to the bone to become a nurse, who'd raised a son alone, who'd inherited Margaret's strength but thankfully not her silence. I'm fighting right now, Margaret said quietly. Every day I wake up is fighting. Every hour I work is fighting. Surviving is fighting. Sarah's anger crumbled into tears. I know, Mama. I'm sorry. I'm so tired of watching them hurt you. Margaret pulled her daughter close, right there on the sidewalk, and held her while she cried. A woman walked past them, clutching shopping bags from Bloomingdale's, her face twisted in annoyance at having to step around them. No one else stopped. That evening, Margaret did something she hadn't done in 18 years. She went back to Westridge Corporation. Not inside. She couldn't go inside. But she stood across the street, in the December cold, and watched the lit windows on the 53rd floor where Richard Westridge's office was located. She didn't know what she was hoping to see. Justice? Karma? Some sign that the universe was paying attention? What she saw instead was worse. At 7:15 p.m., Richard Westridge emerged from the building's main entrance. Not alone. He was with a group of. Richard walked toward her, his expensive shoes clicking on the linoleum. His assistant followed, looking uncomfortable. "What are you doing here?" Richard asked, but his tone made it clear he didn't actually care. "Trying to get your job back? Because I can save you the trouble." "That's not happening." "I'm filing a report," Margaret said quietly. "For my stolen belongings." "Stolen?" Richard laughed. It was a cold sound. "From where?" "From my locker. At Westridge Corporation." "Oh, that." Richard's smile was cruel. "I wouldn't call that stolen. I'd call it disposed of. Unclaimed property. You were told to pick up your things. You didn't. Not my problem." Margaret stood up, her form crumpling in her hand. "You knew. You knew they'd throw everything away." "I knew you didn't belong in that building anymore. What happened to your possessions after you were terminated is your responsibility, not mine." The desk officer who'd been helping Margaret stood up. "Sir, if you disposed of her property without giving her reasonable time to claim it, that could be what?" Richard turned on him. "A civil matter? Sure. She can sue me. I'll bury her in legal fees." He looked back at Margaret. "You worked for me for 18 years, and you never figured out how the world works. People like you?" He gestured at her dismissively. "You're replaceable. There are 100 women who'd take that job tomorrow. You're not special. You never were." The station was silent. Every person in that room, officers, civilians, everyone, was watching. And not one person said a word. Richard turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Margaret? Good luck finding another job. When potential employers call for references, I'll be sure to tell them exactly what kind of employee you were." He walked out. His assistant followed, throwing Margaret an apologetic glance that meant nothing. Margaret stood there, surrounded by witnesses, surrounded by police officers who were sworn to protect people. And nobody did anything. The young officer at the desk cleared his throat. "Ma'am? You still want to file that report?" Margaret looked at the crumpled form in her hand. Looked at the officers who'd watched her be humiliated and done nothing. Looked at the civilians who were already going back to their phones, the entertainment over. "Yes," she whispered. "I still want to file it." Because what else could she do? She had 10 days left to save Marcus. And right now, she had absolutely nothing. Margaret left the police station with her report number written on a yellow post-it note that was already starting to lose its stick. She walked 4 blocks before she realized she was going the wrong direction. Turned around. Walked back. Her blood sugar was dropping again. She could feel it, the shakiness in her hands, the fog in her thoughts. She'd used one of the sample insulin pens this morning, which meant she had 2 days left. 2 days to figure out how to afford more. 2 days to figure out how to afford everything. She found a bus stop bench and sat down, not because she was waiting for a bus, but because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. A teenager walked past, earbuds in, designer sneakers that probably cost more than Margaret's monthly rent. He didn't look at her. A mother with a stroller navigated around her without breaking stride. Margaret closed her eyes. "God, if you're listening, if you're there, I need help. Please. I've tried to be good. I've tried to do right. I need help." "Excuse me? Ma'am?" Margaret opened her eyes. A young woman stood in front of her, mid-20s, wearing a professional blazer, concerned expression. She was holding out a bottle of orange juice. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, "but I'm a nursing student, and I noticed you seemed dizzy. Are you diabetic?" Margaret stared at the orange juice like it was a miracle. "Yes." "How did you kept rubbing your fingers together. It's a common self-soothing behavior when blood sugar drops. Drink this." Margaret took the juice with shaking hands. "Thank you. How much do I?" "Nothing. It's okay." The young woman sat down beside her. "I'm Emily. Are you all right? Do you need me to call someone?" And just like that, Margaret broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quiet tears running down her face while she drank orange juice a stranger had given her. Emily didn't leave. She sat there, silent and steady, until Margaret could breathe again. "I'm sorry," Margaret finally said. "Don't be." Emily's voice was gentle. "Rough day. Rough life." Emily smiled sadly. "Yeah, I get that." She paused. "I don't mean to pry, but do you need help getting somewhere? I have my car." Margaret looked at this young woman who'd stopped her entire day to help someone she didn't know. This stranger who saw her as a human being when everyone else had looked through her. "Can I ask you something?" Margaret said. "Of course. Why did you stop? Why did you help me?" Emily was quiet for a moment. "My grandma raised me. She was a housekeeper. Worked 3 jobs to put my mom through college. She had diabetes too." Emily's eyes got distant. "She died 5 years ago. Couldn't afford her insulin. Rationed it until it was too late." Margaret's chest tightened. "So when I see someone who might be going through what she went through," Emily continued, "I stop. Because nobody stopped for her." They sat in silence for a moment. "What's your name?" Emily asked. "Margaret. Margaret Williams." Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then looked back at Margaret. "Margaret, I have to get back to campus. But can I give you my number? In case you need anything?" "You don't have to, I want to." Emily pulled out a pen and wrote her number on the orange juice bottle. "Call me. Even if you just need someone to talk to." "Okay." Margaret nodded, not trusting her voice. Emily stood to leave, then turned back. "Hey, Margaret. My grandma used to say something. She said that people who survive impossible things, they're not just survivors. They're witnesses. They're here to prove that goodness exists, even when the world tries to beat it out of us." And then she was gone, disappearing into the Manhattan crowd. Margaret sat on that bench for another 10 minutes, staring at the phone number on the juice bottle. Then she stood up, walked to the nearest library because they had free computers, logged into her email. She'd memorized the password years ago. And that's when she saw it. An email. Sent yesterday. From a law firm she'd never heard of, Morrison and Associates, Estate Planning and Probate Law. The subject line read, "Urgent, regarding the estate of James Theodore Williams, deceased." Margaret's hands froze on the keyboard. Her husband. Dead for 18 years. Why would a law firm be contacting her about James now? She clicked the email with trembling fingers. "Dear Mrs. Margaret Williams, we are contacting you regarding the estate of your late husband, James Theodore Williams, who passed away on March 14, 2007. Our firm has been retained to locate you in connection with an inheritance that has recently been identified. Your husband was named as a beneficiary in the will of his uncle, Robert Williams, who passed away in 2006. Due to administrative complications and delayed probate proceedings, the inheritance was placed in trust pending location of legal heirs. After extensive research, we have confirmed that you are the sole surviving heir to this estate. The total inheritance amount, including accrued interest over 18 years, is $847,000. Please contact our office immediately to begin the claims process." Margaret read the email 3 times. Then a 4th time. $847,000. $847,000. She looked around the library, half expecting someone to tell her this was a joke. A scam. A mistake. But the law firm's website was real. Their phone number was real. The documents attached to the email looked real. James's uncle, Robert Williams. Margaret had met him once, briefly, at her wedding. A quiet man who'd sent them a $50 check as a wedding gift. She'd had no idea he had money. James had never mentioned it. And now, 18 years after James died fixing someone's fence for free, after 18 years of Margaret scrubbing floors and skipping meals and wearing shoes with holes in them, the money had found her. Margaret's first thought wasn't about herself. It was, "I can save Marcus." Her second thought was, Richard Westridge humiliated a woman who's about to inherit almost $1 million. She sat at that library computer for another hour, making calls, verifying information, speaking with a lawyer named Patricia Morrison who sounded kind and professional and very, very real. By 4 p.m., Margaret had an appointment scheduled for tomorrow morning to begin the claims process. By 5 p.m., she was on the subway heading back to Sarah's apartment, the orange juice bottle with Emily's number clutched in her hand like a talisman. By 6 p.m., she was sitting at Sarah's kitchen table, Marcus on her lap, telling her daughter about the email. Sarah cried. Marcus asked if this meant Grandma could buy him the Lego set he wanted. Margaret said yes. She could buy him 100 Lego sets. And then she said something else. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 18 years. "I'm going back to Westridge Corporation," Margaret said quietly. "And I'm going to make sure Richard Westridge knows exactly who he threw away." 3 days later, Margaret Williams walked into the Westridge Corporation building wearing a coat that actually fit, carrying a purse she'd bought that morning, and holding documentation that would change everything. Tracy, the security guard, saw her first. "Ma'am," Tracy stood up worried. "You can't be here," Mr. Westridge said. Mr. Westridge said a lot of things. Margaret's voice was calm. Steady. "Is he in the building?" "Yes, but..." "Good. I need to speak with him." "Ma'am, I'll have to call." Margaret placed a business card on the desk. "Patricia Morrison, Morrison and Associates. Call his office. Tell him Margaret Williams is here with her attorney regarding a significant business matter. Tell him if he doesn't see me in the next 10 minutes, my next stop is the New York Times." Tracy picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, Margaret was escorted to the 53rd floor. Not by security this time. By Richard's personal assistant, a nervous young man named Kevin who wouldn't make eye contact. "Mr. Westridge will see you in conference room A," Kevin said. "But he only has a few minutes." "This won't take long." Conference room A had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. A table that could seat 20. Abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than Margaret used to make in a year. Richard Westridge sat at the head of the table, checking his phone. He didn't look up when Margaret entered. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "And this better be good, because you're dangerously close to a restraining order." Margaret sat down across from him, placed her new purse on the table, folded her hands. "You humiliated me," she said simply. Richard finally looked up. His expression was bored. "Is that what this is about? You want an apology?" "I'm sorry. Now leave." "I don't want an apology." "Then what do you want? Money? Because if you're thinking of suing for wrongful termination, I have 12 lawyers who'd love to. I'm not suing you for wrongful termination." Margaret opened her purse, pulled out a document, slid it across the table. "I'm buying your company." Richard laughed. Actually laughed. "You're buying my..." He picked up the document, started reading, stopped laughing. "That's a letter of intent from Catalyst Investment Group," Margaret said. "They're purchasing a controlling interest in Westridge Corporation. The deal closes in 30 days. Richard's face had gone pale. "Where did you get this?" "This is confidential. It stops being confidential when it's filed with the SEC, public record." Margaret leaned forward. "Catalyst specializes in acquiring struggling companies and restructuring them. I'm sure you've been trying to keep it quiet, but your board has been in negotiation with them for 6 weeks. How do you? Because yesterday, I became Catalyst's largest private investor. I bought a 23% stake in their fund." Margaret's voice was steady as steel. "Which means I have controlling interest in the company that's about to own Westridge Corporation." The color drained completely from Richard's face. "That's impossible. That would cost $800 million. I only paid $12 million for my share. But yes, it cost quite a bit." Margaret pulled out another document. "I also spoke with your board of directors yesterday. Interesting group. Very concerned about recent PR issues. Very concerned about a CEO who publicly humiliates employees." "You spoke to my board?" Richard's voice was barely a whisper. "I did. And I showed them security footage from the Christmas gala. The footage where you expelled a 62-year-old employee in front of investors. The footage where you mocked her. The footage that, if released to media, would destroy your company's reputation." Richard stood up. "That footage is private property. Tracy gave it to me. The security guard. She kept a copy because she thought what you did was wrong." Margaret stood too. "Funny thing about treating people like they're invisible. They see everything. And sometimes they remember. Richard grabbed the edge of the table. What do you want? I want you to understand something. Margaret's voice was quiet but filled with iron. You told me I didn't belong. You told me I was replaceable. You told me that people like me don't matter. She stepped closer. But here's what you didn't know, Richard. You didn't know that my husband died 18 years ago helping someone for free. You didn't know that his uncle left him an inheritance that took 18 years to find me. You didn't know that while I was scrubbing your floors, I was raising a grandson with leukemia and doing everything I could to keep him alive. Tears were streaming down Margaret's face now, but her voice never wavered. You didn't know that the cleaning woman you threw away? She's the same woman who's about to decide whether you keep your job. Richard sank back into his chair. The board votes on your future in 2 weeks, Margaret continued. I've already spoken with 6 of the 9 board members. They're very interested in my perspective on your leadership, especially after I told them about the police station, about how you threatened to destroy my references, about how you disposed of my medication. I didn't, you did. And there were witnesses. Margaret pulled out one final document. This is a statement from Officer Brad Chin, the officer who watched you humiliate me. He was so disturbed by your behavior that he filed his own report. Wanted it on record. She placed the statement on the table. So here's what's going to happen, Richard. In 2 weeks, the board will vote. And I will be in that room. And I will tell them that you are unfit to lead this company. Not because of revenge, but because a man who treats people the way you treated me will eventually destroy everything he touches. Richard's hands were shaking. Please. I built this company. You inherited this company from your father. You've been coasting on his reputation for 20 years. Margaret picked up her purse. But that ends now. She walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, and Richard? Marcus, my grandson, he's starting his new treatment next week. The experimental one. The one that costs $47,000 per cycle. I'm paying for all of it. And when he beats this cancer, when he grows up healthy and strong, I'm going to tell him about the man who thought my life didn't matter. Margaret opened the door. I'm going to tell him that karma isn't about revenge. It's about the universe keeping perfect score. And sometimes it takes 18 years. But it never forgets. She walked out. Left Richard Westridge sitting alone in his conference room, surrounded by windows overlooking a city that suddenly felt much smaller. 6 months later, Marcus's cancer went into remission. 4 months after that, Richard Westridge was removed as CEO of Westridge Corporation. The board vote was unanimous. Tracy, the security guard, received a $50,000 thank you bonus from Margaret and a full scholarship to finish her criminal justice degree. Emily, the nursing student, got a call from Margaret offering to pay off her student loans. She cried on the phone for 10 minutes. Father Mike at St. Catherine's received an anonymous donation of $100,000. He used it to start a medical assistance fund for families who couldn't afford treatment. And Margaret? Margaret bought a small house with a yard where Marcus could play. She started a foundation in her husband's name providing financial assistance to service workers facing medical emergencies. She never went back to cleaning professionally. But once a month, she volunteered at St. Catherine's, polishing the pews and mopping the floors. Because some work isn't about money. Some work is about remembering who you are. On Christmas Eve, 1 year after the night she was thrown out of the Westridge building, Margaret sat in her living room with Marcus on one side and Sarah on the other, watching It's a Wonderful Life. Marcus, hair growing back in soft curls, was building a Lego set. Sarah was drinking tea and smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in years. And Margaret thought about Richard Westridge, who'd lost everything because he'd failed to see the humanity in a woman pushing a cleaning cart. She thought about karma, about justice, about the fact that character, in the end, really does win. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Merry Christmas, Margaret. Thank you for everything. You changed my life. Margaret smiled and typed back. You saved mine first. Merry Christmas. Outside, snow began to fall. And in the warm glow of Christmas lights, surrounded by the people she loved, Margaret Williams, former cleaning woman, survivor, witness, felt something she hadn't felt in 18 years.